Hello, you're listening to Recalibrate and Go, a podcast brought to you by Aptude. I'm your host, Michael Foster. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. How's your day going? Of course, I don't know if you're listening to this during the day or at night. I have no control over when you decide to check us out, but I'm just glad that you're here listening. Today on the program, we brought Heather Noggle back. She runs her own company with a good friend, and she's one of the brightest people in the business. I'm so glad to have her back. Last time we talked about working from home, as many of us are doing. And besides a lot of the, practical elements that we're having to deal with, some of us have kids, some of us have other priorities that seem to interfere with our daily working lives, and trying to manage that has been interesting. Now, I worked for myself. My wife and I had our own business in the O's and the aughts. And so for me, this wasn't too much of a transition. For many, it's been, a bumpier road. In fact, some companies, they're working with old legacy systems. You know, those old Frankenstein cobbled together bits of code that somebody built sometime around 2004 that they've been limping along with ever since. They're running into a lot of problems because those old legacy systems weren't meant for this sort of working environment where so many people are logging in. They were having trouble before all this happened, but now that everyone's working from home, it's really stressing out the network. So everyone's having to come face to face with a big decision. Is it time to upgrade those legacy systems? I mean, how can we even think about that? Because budgets are tight, the economy is swaying back and forth. It's a confusing time. Changing your legacy system, changing your whole network, that's a big deal. And I think a lot of people, they're asking these big questions now. Because of course we do. This is what we do during these difficult times. We reevaluate, we reassess, we recalibrate, and then we go. See, that's why we named the show this. It's pretty obvious. Anyway, Heather's on. This is my conversation with her, part one of a two-part series, migrating your legacy system into something more modern. Let's go. Today, we are talking with Heather Noggle, and if you caught the last podcast, if you caught the previous, we talked about working from home. And today we're going to talk about another topic, which I think is going to become crucial over the next couple of years. And that is shifting legacy tech to a modern equivalent. Especially now, I think people are realizing they're suffering from bandwidth issues. People are working from home. We all know that COVID-19 is changing our lives forever. We've heard it so many times, it's almost becoming transparent, but it's here. And so I think this particular topic, there's so much to try to wrap your mind around. So hopefully we can help you if you're looking to shift away from your legacy tech, if you're trying to get a framework around this. I can't think of any person better to talk about this with than Heather Noggle. So Heather, thank you for joining us. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Michael. Good to see you again. Talk with you.
Real quickly now, you own Global Wizard and Exits Inc. So can you tell me a little bit about this?
Okay, sure. Exits Inc. is the parent company and Global Wizard is the product. We help manufacturers largely export by streamlining and automating their export compliance. And this legacy tech we're going to be talking about is actually software I wrote when I was a software developer. So it's like my first child. And it's in need of replacing. And so that's this exercise we've been undergoing for the past several years that we'll talk through.
So you're really, I said, you were the best person to talk to about this, but obviously you sold that. That's really, really good. So obviously, and I know these days you talk about, you've obviously onboarding SaaS platform, retooling, all that technical stuff, which I won't lie to you, to the audience. I'm an art guy. I'm not the smart guy. So I have to rely on smart people like Heather to explain to me what the hell's going on, because honestly, I can't lie to you, I don't know. So I'm very fortunate that I work in this industry and I work with people that can inform me right from the beginning. The big question is, of course, what to replace and when. And I think, I know this because of the people I work with. You work with companies, they've been working with this Frankenstein monster of a program for so many years. They've built and added things onto it, but it's so much is connected to it. it's sort of like having a heart transplant, literally, just by removing this legacy system and replacing it with something else. And so I think a lot of times people drag their feet. And right, I mean, I get that because it's an overwhelming process at times. It can be frightening because you're kind of getting into something that you may not quite understand what's going to be involved. And even the people who are going to be working on it sometimes won't know the depth of what will need to be fixed until you get in there. I think in the tech world, people always assume that they know everything. And so, you just go ahead and fix it. You're good to go. But it's like, no, we got to know what the hell you did to this thing first. Kind of like a doctor, kind of like doing surgery. You got to take a peek and see what's going on before you can make a synopsis. So right off the bat, obviously, I think that when you approach somebody and they're considering, okay, maybe it's time, we got to do the shift, I think they always kind of want to know, like, what do we need to replace? What's the timetable? Does this whole thing got to go? How does that conversation go?
Well, a lot of times people don't want to talk about it. In our situation, it's just that we have older tech and that newer tech is better. It's not so much that we've got the spaghetti monster, because the tech's pretty solid. I mean, I would say that, of course, I wrote it, but it's still pretty solid and pretty relevant in how it operates. It purrs, but the tech behind it, it needs the upgrade. And so if you are in constant pain of your software, you're going to have a greater impetus of, you must replace this. But if it's running well, it's very hard to step back and be strategic and say, it's time. And I promise you it's time. So yeah, you can look at it three ways. One, you can look at, we're going to replace this whole system, which means we're going to eventually just, our legacy system will be deprecated and the whole system will be replaced. And that will happen with some parallel testing or something like that, to make sure that one will replace the other. And then another way to do this is to implement pieces in a new environment and try to make that seamless for your customers. So maybe you then have your legacy tech stack and you've got your new, but it goes back and forth between and the customers don't really know. And then the third way is to really begin the process of selling that this must be done. If you're not ready yet to do it, but you understand it's coming, then it's gathering your information, making sure you can present a solid why, what gains are you going to experience, and how will it be implemented. The first thing I found, the first time I tried to sell this legacy tech replacement when I was an employee and not the owner, was, well, how much is it going to cost me? And if you have a big piece of software, there's no real good answer to that. How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost me? There's opportunity cost that's built in there, that if you don't do it, that there are costs associated as well. So it's probably a continuous quality improvement sort of exercise that every year you should be looking at your software stack as a whole and say, what's going to need replacement now? What's in 5 years? There's no one answer to this because every software package is different.
Time for a break. These are crazy times, man. And, we recognize all of your overall strategies might be taking a back seat to the immediate priorities of the moment. But as we get through this, Aptude will be ready with options to get those projects back on track, contain costs while providing quality deliverables so that you can get more done. We're here to help. Whether or not you need services right now or just want to have a friendly, free-flowing, brainstorming chat about your current situation, don't hesitate to reach out. We're Aptude, keeping you one step ahead of the curve. I think a lot of the reason why people are always just afraid to do that switch is simply just, it's like infrastructure. It's like anything that's just, you drag your feet, got to get the house repaired. It's emotionally not as engaging. It's almost like you kind of do it when you have to do it. I think it's just a human trait. I think we're all like that to a certain capacity. It's like, oh gosh, we got to put a new roof on. I mean, how many leaks? How many leaks is that? Well, just a couple where we can go for another year. And then eventually I think the pain becomes too great. Is it hard to present that model that says, well, if you spend this year switching over, in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to reap so much cost benefit? Is that a hard sell? Is that even, do people kind of get that more now than they did back in the day? Or no, not, you're laughing. So obviously I don't think they do either, but
It depends. The smaller the project, the easier the sell, in my opinion. And we have customers who are still on their old AS400 systems. We have customers on brand new modern systems. A lot of that is going to depend. We've seen them shift is where I'm going from one to the other sometimes. The impetus behind this is often how much pain you're feeling and how forward thinking you are. And those are two very different approaches. The forward-thinking people will attend to it before the roof leaks, and they'll understand that this is continuous quality improvement, that that particular fix is not going to last 10 years. They're going to have to continue to upgrade and work with modern tech as modern tech gets better, because you don't realize the gains of modern tech until you make that shift. And to go from dinosaur tech to modern tech is a pretty hard thing, but to move from one shift of modern tech to the next greatest thing can often be a much shorter putt. I recommend that everybody takes a look at getting their legacy tech where it needs to be and have that full plan, full process, full audit.
Do you find it's an easier sell to do, like, we're just going to gut your whole system and replace it with something new, or to do pieces, or it doesn't matter? Is the whole thing just wig people out to the point where they don't like to talk about it? I don't know. I'm curious.
By the time I'm working with people, it's usually because they're already in a modernization project. So it's not something I have to try to sell. It's we want to engage you to help us with point X of project Y because we made decision Z. At that point, they're already sold from a company that they need to do something better than what they're doing today. And sometimes the tech we replace is as simple as Word and Excel. It just does not meet their needs. They need a full system. So on our own replacements in technology, we have found that we have to be very careful that when we do replace, say, the user interface, that we don't lose the things we did really well, while also adding things we can do better. So I think that's been one of our challenges in replacing our internal software. And I imagine that's universal.
And it's interesting because we talk about the idea of selling the shift, the why, the how, the gains, how it's going to be implemented, kind of breaking that down. But before we get into that, obviously it's 2020, it's springtime. We are in the midst of the coronavirus. And so one of the things I keep hearing is that because of bandwidth issues, because people are now working from home, because of security issues, that over the next few months, once things settle down a bit and we start reevaluating what our priorities are, that there's going to be a huge push to get off of legacy tech. One is, I'd love to know if you agree or disagree with that. And if so, like, how does, when you're in terms of selling the shift, does that help sell the shift? Is it just more stress?
Okay. I think everybody's eyes are open right now. And that anybody who is using older tech, say something pre-software as a service, and has to continue doing his or her job is probably in some pain right now. So from home, if you don't have good tech infrastructure from your company, you might not be able to access key things that you require to do your best. You might not be able to work efficiently, and you might have to do the same volume that you did before, but with fewer tools, fewer processes, fewer pieces of software. I'm just speculating. I'm just sure that for most people, this could carry a very painful ability to keep productive if the software isn't where it needs to be. We've been software as a service since 2003. So even that first model of what we worked on and released, we were online. We were right there in the beginning. So we really don't see any shift in our day-to-day as a distributed company. But yes, the legacy tech is a little bit scary, and cobbled together processes. I won't knock the Zapier and the if this then that as a way of putting together something that's better than no automation at all, but it's not a long-term solution. And so I would even call that legacy tech. It's a way to automate a process until you find a way to do it better, like everything.
And I imagine the biggest pain points, or the biggest pain just in general right now, has to be with anything has to do with accounting or security. Because in terms of like the legacy tech, I can imagine in places where there's a lot more security and procedure, that has to be very difficult for them.
Yeah, and you see a lot of people really warning that there are still people doing evil things out there trying to take advantage of everybody's relaxed state of security as we're trying to get set up to work together. And that the cyber attacks are coming in a very fast and furious fashion. Lots of F's there. But
no, I will have to get our security expert. I think I've actually had some people we're going to be talking to that obviously, like I know very little. I'm glad to have people like you who can tell me about this stuff.
I have staff for the cybersecurity aspect. That's not my area either. But the companies who have thought through scenarios like this and are really educating their people to be careful are going to be far ahead of those consumers and companies that have not really thought that this is a prime time for cyber attack, because it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you don't like to think that people will kick you while you're down, but there is always that element. But getting back into legacy tech to modern tech, there's something you mentioned about the idea of, keeping the value of the original tech, but adding additional value is going to come with the transition. I think that's really important, because I think that's part of what helps sell the process, is the fact that if they don't feel like they're going into something completely different, completely new, that won't make any sense to them, to sort of help reduce that learning curve.
Yeah, I have a really good example I saw on a website. If you have a form you're going to fill out once to enter a contest or do something or what have you, it doesn't have to be completely user friendly. But if a person is going to reuse that form 50 times a day, it's got to be absolutely optimized. So part of what we do, there's a data entry component, or at least a data review and manipulation component for the companies who integrate with us. But if there's a person on that page, I want to make sure that we are not frustrating him or her. And so we have to be that attention of detail to the level of, this is somebody's job to work with this. And I want to make that job as pleasant as possible. So I saw a government website, I'll pick on the government, where there was an address that was laid out across the screen. Now, whenever we see an address, we see address line, we see the name, address line 1, address line 2, potentially, a city, state, postal code. If I have to process that across a horizontal line, it's going to take me a whole lot longer than if I see that address in the form I'm used to reviewing it. So we're very careful for things like that are obvious to people, to not throw them in upheaval and keep what they expect, because that's a productivity gain.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I found that, and I've heard this, where, when they've done the migration from a legacy tech to a modern equivalent, it make improvements all across the board. But if it doesn't do the one thing well that the previous system did very well, it doesn't matter. Like it's almost like the whole thing gets thrown out. And like I said, I work in the art department, so my goal is always managing expectations. Really, that's most of what you do. Is to basically present what it is that your company does from, an advertising marketing perspective, honestly, effectively, but a little clever, and then to deliver on that promise. And it's amazing how even just as simple as one UI UX shift, it can completely change the way somebody feels about the site or about the interface.
It is the user experience that will ultimately determine the success or failure of this project, so long as it works somewhat well. If it works really, really beautifully well on the tech and everything is gorgeous and pristine, but the users don't experience it that way, it doesn't matter. So that's the other piece of it, is how the users experience the day-to-day operation with your software that you are selling to them, presenting with them, and retaining them to use for years to come. That's so important. And so if I have, as a business owner, if I have a fear on our software replacement, it is right there, that we are going to remove the smallest of features that really makes our users' lives happy, and they're not going to tell us. So to speak to that, we've got to involve the users wherever we can in making sure we retain key features and the way they operate today, or improve them with the idea that making sure that that's what we're doing. We are improving.
Thanks for listening. That was Heather Noggle talking about migrating from legacy tech to something more modern. It's a lot to wrap your brain around, I get it. But that's why we're talking about it. So be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Check out our blog on aptude.com. We have a lot of information. We cover a lot of ground, from AI to BI, robotic process automation, Power BI, Power Apps. We have lectures, we have discussions, we have videos. It's all there for you to check out. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back soon.